Thank you, John, for your candid honesty and your balance. So our message today, our topic is about this idea of balance, the balance of wisdom and love, the balance of mind and heart. There's that distance that seems to be so narrow, and yet it is such a long journey to go from the mind to the heart, to be able to connect. And I like to believe, and I like to speak about that intersection, that point at which the mind and the heart come together. That's where the balance arises, because as Shakespeare said, you could be all in the heart and all about love, and you're unaware of the petty follies that you get involved with, or you could be totally in the mind and you have no compassion and no thought for anybody else. It's all about everything that's in the mind, and yet there's no balance. And then you begin to realize, as you understand this, why your life shows up in the chaotic way that it does. Because the experience is that if I'm either one or the other and I'm not in that balance, then something is out of sync. Something is out of alignment. As children, we play on the teeter-totter. And it's a great analogy for life, because life is often like a teeter-totter. It's like we never know whether we're up or down or which way we're going, and depending on how much weight is put on the other side, we could go flying off into, some obscure experience. But when we find that place of balance, when we have adjusted ourselves such that we can hold that, and I remember so often with my siblings and the neighborhood kids, when we would be at the school ground and we would try to do that, we'd see how long we could hold that balance in the teeter-totter and how exciting that was to be there. And then, of course, there was always some wisecrack that would like to jump off, and then crash, here we go. So, doesn't that happen in life? Well, it has in mine, So I look at this thing about balance, and I think this would have been a really, really good talk for Ricky Knoll, our bookkeeper, because accountants and bookkeepers love this idea of balance. God has everything in balance. He's going, yes! It's all in balance. We love that when we're, working through the finances, and, everything in the balance sheet has to come out so that it is equal. So if you would do a debit someplace, then there has to be a credit someplace else. And there has to be this adjustment if it doesn't come out correctly. And you have to figure out where that is. When I do my checking account, and I'm pretty accurate about it, but mostly when I get to that point, there's a key on the button that says, well, just enter an adjustment, whatever it is, it'll come out together. And then it puts a little red thing in there and says, this is an adjustment to your balance account. And I said, whatever, it went someplace. As long as the end result is balance, isn't that great? Yeah, because what we're looking for, most of us, I believe, is to find happiness in our life. We want to enjoy this experience of happiness. We want to have that joy. We want to have that sensation of feeling that everything is in alignment in our life. And that comes through when we're able to bring forth the wisdom and the love into that point of intersection, that we can bring it into alignment so that we can have the experience of what we want in our life. When I observe children, and I speak often about children because for like 25 years of my adult experience was working in the foster care system, and so I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of children, and mostly those who have come from some disadvantage, some situation that no one would want to wish upon anybody. And yet there it was. They've had an experience at 9, 10, and 11 years old that most of us can't hardly even imagine. Some really devastating, horrible things. And oftentimes it was placed upon them by the ones that they were supposed to love and trust that were going to provide for them. And of course, they walk into that situation, or they find themselves in that situation, and they begin to believe, because see, everything is about what we believe. They begin to believe that somehow they are wrong, that they are the ones that caused this, that they were the ones that if they were just a little bit better, if they were just a little bit stronger or smarter or quieter or more invisible, then everything would be all right. This was a big experience that we discovered in working with these children, is that more often than not, what they really wanted was to be invisible. They didn't, because if you were invisible, then nothing could happen to you. You could avoid all those horrible situations. And then as therapists and as counselors and as adults trying to help them come into the experience of life in which they could move forth and become productive and successful, oftentimes what we're doing is probing and prodding and pulling and pushing and trying to get them to come out of that invisibility and in some way experience all of that over again. Because there's something to be said for this idea of release and surrender, of getting it out, in order to be able to move into the place of forgiveness. Because if we do not reach that place of forgiveness, then we're going to contain this within us, and we suppress it, and we push it down, and it becomes like a pressure cooker. And sooner or later, guaranteed, something is going to give. It has to. That is the way in which nature works. Something has to let go. Something has to be released. Something has to come forth and come out of it in order for the experience to move into a greater place of reality and grace. And it's not easy. And it's not even simple. There are times when I say that in Science of Mind we talk about this idea of life and experience, that life is really simple, but it's not easy. Well, I'm kind of moving off of this idea that life is really simple, because the more I look into the experience of life, the more I'm beginning to realize the complexity that's going on in life. That when you do a little bit of study into the field of science, you begin to see the amount of complexity that's going on in life. It's incredible. I no longer believe that we've just happened by accident. I never really did, but some people do. Some people think that it was just a big bang and we happened by accident. There it was, little tadpole in the water that evolved out into the human being. The reality of it is that even though we've been looking for the missing link for so many centuries, we can't find it because it's not there. The truth of the matter is that human beings are unique, individualized expressions of the divine. And it is our place in this world to realize that. What makes us unique? Consciousness. We know that we know that we know. I love to sit in the morning as I wake up and I have my cup of coffee and I look out my door into my backyard and observe nature going on. And I like to see how that kind of interrelates with life. Because whatever's going on in nature is probably going on in my life in some place and somewhere. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow, isn't this fascinating? I have a neighbor that's about 4 or 5 houses down. And when we first moved in there, Gary and I were looking at his yard and we were thinking, it's artificial. It was too perfect.